Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and it was many, many, many years ago, almost a different lifetime ago. I was working at WMCA Radio here in New York City, and I was involved with WMCA Radio, I was involved with WOR Radio, and at the time there was, this is the late 70s, early 80s, there suddenly was this extraordinary force that seemed to take over the New York airwaves, and slowly it took over all of America in all forms of media, and it was located in this very tiny body of an extraordinary human being, an extraordinary woman, whom the world came to know as Dr. Ruth. And I had the privilege of knowing Dr. Ruth at the very, very beginning. I don't even know if you remember this. I got to know her even before the world realized what an extraordinary gift she would be to all of us. She and I were together, you and I were together at a rabbinic conference of sorts, and it was early in your career, and you were a guest speaker, and I was there. I was doing the program L'Chaim then. It was in one of the first years of this radio program.
Was it conservative
yes,
rabbis?
Yes.
I remember.
And
or was it the Reform?
No,
I talked to all of them.
Yes. And lo and behold, you came on with me. You said, okay, I'll meet with you after I speak. And we went into a room at this convention center. And I had the chance to interview for the first time Ruth Westheimer, who is now known to the world as Dr. Ruth. And she then went on to do an extraordinary call-in show at WOR Radio.
No, WYNY Radio.
Were you ever on WOR?
Never.
Okay, I apologize.
Only maybe as a guest, it's okay.
WYNY.
WYNY, NBC Radio.
Okay, and what time of night?
On Sunday nights.
Sunday nights.
I did it for 10 years, every Sunday night from 10 to 12, called Sexually Speaking.
And it was groundbreaking. No one was doing this at the time.
That's true.
And you know, if somebody had said, let's take a little Jewish woman and
with an accent,
put her on radio and let her talk to the world about sex, people would have said, that's crazy.
Right.
And yet you became a phenomenon, and you made a contribution in the area, in what is the most important area of human behavior and human relationships. And now you are an icon, and you are doing extraordinary things now, and it is lovely that you have a chance, that you have given me a chance to sit just to talk for a few moments about your own Jewish life. Yes,
all
what?
Right. So, Mark, first of all, yesterday I gave a talk to 150 psychiatrists, Downstate Medical Center, about one of the books that I just did now about Alzheimer's and the caretakers. But in any case, I talked about sex for older people, sex over 50. And there was a gentleman with a kippah.
Yes.
And I right away explained to him, which I want to do to you and your viewers, why I believe that my being so Jewish, coming from an Orthodox Jewish home, Frankfurt am Main, why it was easier for me to talk about issues of sex so openly, because for us Jews, sex has never been a sin.
Yes.
It always has been a mitzvah,
yes,
an obligation on a married
yes,
man to satisfy his wife on Friday night. So I told a little bit of the midrash of the story of the yeshiva bocher being under the rabbi's bed, and the rabbi saying, is that proper behavior to be under the bed of the rabbi? And the yeshiva bocher crawling out, ktsat b'mvucha, a little bit embarrassed, saying, Rabbi, what you are doing is mitzvah, and it's Torah, not mitzvah. Torah, and Torah I must learn from you. It explains why somebody like me, coming out of Nazi Germany, has an obligation to make a dent in this world. Bishvil tikkun olam, to repair the world. I did not know that that dent would be talking about orgasm and erection and sex from morning till night. But I did know that I have to stand up to be counted. So I was very fortunate. I have chutzpah, I have nerve, and I was very well trained. So the combination of my accent, of my being already in my 50s at the time, and having I was not only well trained, but having the ability to transmit that knowledge.
Yes, it's
That's
a gift.
what worked
It's a
so
gift.
well.
Yes, you've explained it very, very well. So I want to start at the beginning. Julius and Irma
Yeah.
Siegel,
Yeah.
your parents?
Yeah.
Where were you born?
I was born in Wiesenfeld, but that's only, my parents already lived in Frankfurt am Main, Orthodox Jews.
Orthodox Jews.
Orthodox Jews.
So what was your Jewish home
My-
and your Jewish was there Shabbat every Friday night?
Absolutely Orthodox. I went to a very wonderful Orthodox Jewish school, Samson Raphael Hirsch, which was far away from where we lived, but they took me by bicycle because they wanted for me to have that background.
Even though you were a girl?
Even so, I was a girl. I was an only child. I was able to go to synagogue every Friday night with my father. He had enough money in the vest pocket of his suit to buy me an ice cream on the way there, because he would not have carried money on the Sabbath. And I was born in Wiesenfeld because my mother, when I came to this world, went to her parents on the farm
I understand.
to have me, but I really grew up in Frankfurt. And until November 1938, when my father was taken to a labor camp, nobody yet knew about concentration camps. And I was offered to go to Switzerland.
But during that period of time when you were living with your mother and father, it was...
And a grandmother.
And who was the grandmother?
Grandmother Selma, who was a widow.
Whose
the
side?
mother of my father, who had nothing else to do, Mark, but to take care of me. My mother helped my father in the business.
What business?
It was lower middle class. It was a business of notions. He went by bicycle to stores to sell notions, handkerchief and all kind of threads and things like that. Lower middle class. But the grandmother was a learned woman, and there
Her
was
name?
Selma.
Selma.
And nothing else to do but to raise me. She was very proud of me.
A loving person?
She was a wonderful person. Was a little heavy set and a wonderful person. On my way home from Samson Raphael Hirsch School, I went there at the age, I wasn't even 6 yet. A doctor came, I remember the name, Merzbacher, German Jewish name. He said, "You can't be in this class, you are too short." And I told him 5 times 5 is 25, and I talked. I must have had a very good mouthpiece already then. That came from my grandmother, not my mother. My mother was a very quiet woman. That grandmother talked a lot. So I convinced him that I want to stay in that class. I then went to the first class of the gymnasium, which is called a sexta, and then came November.
Okay, we'll
38.
get to that in 1 minute. You know from your professional work how important the early years are for any person in shaping personality. As you reflect upon your own personality now, the gregariousness, the outgoingness, the ability to be as articulate, and you look at your mother and father, to what extent are you a product of them?
I'm really a product in terms of the educative process. And you are right. The early childhood socialization, the early childhood experience is what really carried me through all the horror of World War II, through the Haganah, which we'll talk about later, to everything that I did that came from that grandmother. My mother's parents, we went every summer, and we went also for some holidays. It was called Wiesenfeld near Aschaffenburg. That was, they were also rather quiet people. My mother was the oldest of 6 siblings, so she was the first one to get married, and she was the first one to have a child. And so I was very spoiled. I had an aunt, my mother's youngest sister, Ida, who didn't make it out of the Holocaust, who was not much older than me. But they all doted on me.
If I said to you, you loved your mother and father, it would be true?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not only that, don't forget to be an only child
Yes.
in Frankfurt am Main, in an Orthodox Jewish home, where Friday night there was a Shabbat meal, where first I went to synagogue because there were no boys. I was able to go to synagogue with my father. I was able to sit next to my father. Usually girls didn't do that. And I had a very, very happy, wonderful first 10 years of my life.
The way I understand it, you're roughly 11 years old and your father is taken. Tell me about that.
10 and a half.
What happens?
So my father the Nazis come to the house. First of all, it was after November 9th, after the night of...
After Kristallnacht.
I don't say Kristallnacht, I say broken glass, because crystal implies wonderful chandeliers and wonderful glasses of champagne. So I say broken glass. And somebody had told me, my father told somebody, tomorrow nothing is going to happen because it's a Catholic holiday in Germany. But my father was taken on that Catholic holiday. They came to the apartment.
Do you remember this?
Of course. In big black boots. There was no shouting and no hitting. I do remember, Mark, my grandmother wore a long skirt. That was the fashion then. In the seam of the skirt, she had some money. And I remember that she gave the Nazis money and said, take good care of my son. There was no shouting, there was nothing. My father was taken. I went to the window to look. There was a truck outside. He mounted the truck. I don't know who else was in the truck because it was covered. He turned around with a faint smile and waved because he saw me in the window. That was the last I saw of my father.
Is it a painful memory for you?
Of course. When I was told that I'm on the list of the children who were invited to go to Switzerland for 6 months, hoping that the parents would be able to leave. But as you know, no country took them, and I didn't want to go. I didn't want to leave my mother and grandmother. I especially remember the painful Hanukkah in 1939 when my father was not home, and my mother and grandmother and I lit the menorah. It was very sad. My father wrote a postcard that it would help him. My name then was Carola. Ruth was my middle name. But in then Palestine, they said, you have to switch your name to a Hebrew name. So maybe that was good. Dr. Ruth probably is better than Dr. Carola. But I keep my K to keep my 2 feet in the past, anchored. So he said it would help him to be able to leave the labor camp back to Frankfurt if I would join that group of children. There was, in 1938, there was a conference in Evian where Roosevelt and other people from the free world sent delegates. Let's save German Jewry. That conference failed miserably. The only thing that came out of it was let's at least save the children. England, despite the dark clouds on the horizon, took 10,000 children for 6 months. Holland, Belgium, France, and Switzerland took 300. If I had been Holland, Belgium, or France, I wouldn't be alive because these children did not make it. The British, the people who went to England, they made it. They went mostly into foster homes. I was very Orthodox. So the Swiss children went to an Orthodox Jewish children's home, not far from Lake Constance, not far from Zurich and St. Gall, that became an orphanage. I would not be alive if I had not been in that group.
You understand that for American Jews who have grown up never knowing the kind of experiences you've described, it is almost inconceivable for us to imagine either as children having to leave our homes or to see our children taken from us because we wanted to keep them safe.
Right.
When it's your turn to leave, please remember how you felt and what that moment was like for you. And you're going to someplace, you have no idea where you're going.
Right. First of all, I knew that I had to go. So that's number one. Number two.
You did know.
I knew that I had to go because my father said he couldn't come back from.
You were doing this for your father?
But
Well, did your
absolutely.
father say this because he wanted you to go or because he thought it was true? In other words, did he
I will never know.
You'll never know.
You can't speculate on that. I think the sacrifice that my parents and grandmother in Frankfurt and the grandparents in Wiesenfeld, in the village near Würzburg, I do not know. I have 2 children. I now have 4 grandchildren.
Mazal tov.
That's why I'm telling you that Hitler lost and I won, because I have the best grandchildren in the entire world. The sacrifice of sending their only child with a Kindertransport, with a group of children, not knowing what would happen to them or to their child, I don't know if I could have done that. So I'm at the Frankfurt railroad station. I wave goodbye to my mother and grandmother. I remember my grandmother was already aged, running to wave goodbye until the train went around a bend. That was the last I ever saw any of them. Now, there was somebody in Switzerland in that children's home that became an orphanage. The people who took care of us, first of all, thanks to the Swiss, I'm alive. I would not be here. The people who were responsible for us in that Orthodox Jewish children's home were not trained psychologists. They were not pedagogues. There was a woman who used to say to us that our parents are snake parents. Snake parents eat their young. That if she had a child, she was not married at the time, if she had a child, she would never let it go. They would never send it away. They were not pedagogues and they did terrible things. So there was another boy and I who started to wet our bed because they told us once you go to your room, you can't go out anymore. You tell a child you can't go out to the bathroom, that's what they have to make. And we had to write that to our parents. That was a horrible thing. Here are German, Jewish, middle-class parents who have this wonderful little girl, 10.5-year-old, suddenly having a bedwetter. So I remember the letter they sent back.
What did it say?
It said, try not to wet your bed. And it always said by the grandmother, be good and trust in God, because she was very Orthodox. And study hard. My father always studied hard. So in any case, this children's home, on the one hand, saved our lives. If I hadn't been there, I wouldn't be alive. They fed us. They got money from the rich Swiss Jews from Zurich. And there were many good things about it. For example, I was an only child, so suddenly I had brothers and sisters. We were so alone, without parents, without relatives, that we really formed a community of children. I still visit in Israel every single year. I visit my colleagues that became like brothers and sisters in Israel.
That's wonderful.
Many went to Israel. I have one in Switzerland. I see every year. So here's where we are in Switzerland. We all became orphans of the Holocaust. I do not call myself a survivor. I call myself, because I wasn't in a camp, I have no number, I call myself an orphan of the Holocaust. And in 1945, they offered me to become a kindergarten teacher in Switzerland, but in the meantime, I have become an ardent Zionist, because the Zionists were smart. They sent very good-looking shlichim, very good-looking guys to talk to us about that country of Palestine. And I knew that we Jews need a country of our own.
What happens to your parents?
And the parents, I never will know, because they were in Litzmannstadt, which is the Lodz ghetto, and then probably Auschwitz. I will never know. I know that none of them survived.
You never saw them again?
No. My father, I do have a date of death. My grandmother also. My mother is kind of lost. No date. Interesting.
And this is something you learn as you're living in Switzerland?
I learned that at the end of World War II in 45. So I then in 45 knew there was no country that wanted us. And I knew that we had to build a country for Jews to be able to go to. So I was determined, never mind that they offered me to go to school, to be a kindergarten teacher. I wanted to be a doctor. Every German Jewish girl with some sechel, with some brain wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be a pediatrician. I knew I couldn't. I don't have a high school diploma. Don't tell anybody. I just taught 6 years at Yale and 6 years at Princeton. I'm now teaching this spring at Columbia University's Teachers College. But I knew that would not be possible. No parents, no money. So I said, okay, I'll be a kindergarten teacher. I'm short. I can sit on those little chairs.
Okay. Again, I don't think American Jews, I don't think most Jews understand that this wasn't la-di-da for any of you.
Of course.
That it was an enormously painful thing you went through. And
Right.
what is extraordinary about you is to understand how you transcend it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would imagine, Ruth, there were other young people for whom what you went through, they were not able to transcend the way you did.
Except you have to know that when I met the children who came out of Bergen-Belsen, of the concentration camp, who came to Switzerland to the same orphanage, what they went through could not have been compared
Yes.
to what we went through.
Yes.
So there is something, some mechanism that says, look how fortunate I did not have to go through any of that. However, there is no question throughout my life, I'm going to be 85 now, there is an obligation that I have to do a dent in this world.
You feel that all the time.
All the time, every day, that I have to make a contribution because I was spared all of this horrors and I'm alive. Now, I did not know that the contribution would be talking about sex
Yes, I do
from
understand.
morning to night.
Okay. All right. So now how do you get from, you're going to be a kindergarten teacher, because ultimately what we want to do is find out how you end up in Palestine.
Mm-hmm. So I said, never mind the seminary in Switzerland. Why? We need a country of our own. I need to be an agricultural worker. I have to go to a kibbutz.
Do you, you still consider yourself an Orthodox Jew? When you were 15 years old?
I still was an Orthodox Jew.
At that point you still
Yes,
were?
until I got to Israel. Then,
Okay.
then I wasn't in a synagogue for 6 years. I went to a kibbutz because I said Jews don't need intellectuals. Jews need people to create a homeland so that something like this could never happen again, so that Jews have a place to go to.
So how do you get to Palestine?
I get to Palestine with a transport legally, with a youth aliyah certificate, and legally went to the kibbutz and worked 1 year, went to another kibbutz and washed dishes so that I could learn Hebrew and be a kindergarten teacher, become a kindergarten teacher. Then I went to Jerusalem.
Were those good times for you?
The kibbutz was mixed because I did realize that after 6 years in an orphanage, I already realized I wanted to make decisions about my life myself and not be in a collective where everything that I wanted to do had to be decided by the collective. However, the first year I was still an enthusiastic kibbutznik, dancing every Friday night, the whole night. But then I did realize I needed to study. I couldn't just pick tomatoes and olives. I was very bored. So then I went to Jerusalem to enter a kindergarten seminary. I went to study in the mornings. In the afternoon, I babysat. Babysitting in those years was not like in the States.
And why?
You had to iron. You had to wash dishes. You had to work. There was no television. You had to really work for that dollar, whatever it was. And then, because that's what you want to talk about, I was a very short period of time in the Haganah. But that was all of us, it wasn't an act of heroism on
Why
my
not?
part.
Why not?
Because all of us entered some part of the IDF that later became IDF.
Yes.
So I belonged to the Haganah, which became then Israel Defense Forces.
Okay, is this in Jerusalem?
In Jerusalem.
Okay.
I was very well trained. Now watch out, Mark.
I will.
I was a sniper. I can still put, if the photographer of yours, the cameraman is not making me look good, I can put 5 bullets in that little circle. I know how to throw hand grenades. But
Where were you trained?
In Jerusalem, called Schneller. Was
What
the
year, roughly? Is this still before 48?
Absolutely, 47,
Okay.
48.
And just out of curiosity, in Jerusalem, there were also what we now call underground armies. You had the Haganah, you also had the Irgun, the Lehi.
I would not have...
You were not involved with that at all?
Not at all, because that would have been too extreme for me, even though I realize, and you realize, that without the Lehi and without the Etzel, maybe history would have been different.
I believe that.
But I believe that too. But I was Haganah. I can't tell you much about that because it was a short period of time. On June 4th, 1948, Israel was declared March.
May 14th.
May 14. On June 4th, which means 3 weeks later, I was very badly wounded on my birthday.
Where were you?
I was at the Beit HaChalutzot, at the girls' residence where I lived with other students, and the alarm rang. I knew what it means, go down to a shelter. But it was on my birthday, on my 20th birthday, somebody had given me a book. I said, okay, I'll go to the shelter, but first I'll go to my room, pick up the book, because who knows how long I have to be in the shelter. And I came back into the hall, and a cannonball exploded and killed some girls next to me and wounded me very badly on both legs. I thought I would die. I did ask a friend who opened my shoes, do I have to die? And fortunately, there was a brilliant surgeon at Hadassah. Hadassah was not up at Mount Scopus. Hadassah was in the city of Jerusalem, who fixed my feet. When I find a good partner, I can dance the whole night. And I was a super good skier until recently. I just gave it up.
He really
And
healed your
yes, and
feet.
I was fortunate. Another friend who was a physician came and changed the bandages every day, and I have no problems. So
But that meant your Haganah career was over?
yes, so my Haganah career was over very fast. But for some reason which I can't explain, watch out, I can still shoot those 5 bullets into the red circle and throw hand grenades.
Okay, so talk about it from a different perspective. Not from any personal involvement, but you lived through the birth of the Jewish people's dream for a resurrected Jewish commonwealth, a new Jewish state.
The night that Ben Gurion declared Israel.
Yes, where are you?
I was in Jerusalem. I didn't sleep, not a minute. I was on a truck, and we went through all of Jerusalem dancing and singing. It was an unbelievable experience. And then the 7 armies attacked.
Did you know that was going to happen?
No, I did not know. I just knew that things were not good, that we felt that things are not good. I did not know if that Burma Kvish, if that highway Burma that went on the side, the Burma Road, had not been built. I didn't know that Jerusalem would have fallen. I know that now. You know that now.
Yes.
There are many things I did not know. I lived more, I was 20 years old, and I lived more in that idea. I tell you what I did know, that I fell in love.
Oh.
Right away at the hospital. There was a wonderful nurse, a male nurse.
This is after
from
you're
Romania.
wounded?
Yes. I made believe, come here. I made believe that I couldn't eat by myself. Nonsense. Of course I could eat. My feet were wounded, not my hands. So that he had to feed me. We had a wonderful love affair.
So you heal and you get better.
Right.
And
I
then what do you do?
continue my studies as to be a kindergarten teacher in Jerusalem. I get
You're
married.
still going to be a kindergarten teacher.
I'm still going to be. I knew that I couldn't be a physician. I told you, no money, no parents,
Did you
no
worry?
high school
Okay.
diploma.
Did you worry? Did you worry in 1948 when suddenly this infant state is attacked by 7 Arab nations that Israel would be destroyed?
No, not for a moment. It's a good question, but maybe it has to do with being a young man and young women. Maybe it had to do with being an ardent Zionist, and maybe that question really never occurred to me. Now, when I look back, I say to you, Mark, this was a miracle that they were not better trained, the armies that attacked that young state, and that state survived, a miracle.
Your point is, had the Arab nations been better trained, it would have been more disastrous for Israel.
No question. No question. But I'm not talking about politics.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about, I'm not an army expert.
Okay.
But
So
there's
you're-
no question.
Okay, so now you
Yeah.
can, so the war ends, life resumes, correct?
Right.
And you're now going
Life is very difficult. Not much to eat. For example, we got 1 egg a week. I brought my 1 egg a week, but that's what I'm short. I would have been short anyway. I brought it to a friend who is still a friend of mine. She lives in Haifa, because she was pregnant. My 1 egg a week I did not eat. I brought it to her, but she was Swiss, and she had instant coffee. I remember the taste and the smell. Every Friday night, after the meal, I got instant coffee.
That's lovely. Now you get married, you say.
I got married with somebody who was in the army, who came from Romania, but he was 3 years old when he came from Romania. And he even left illegally where he was in the barracks, jumped over one of those barriers to come and visit. So I married. We are still good friends. I went with him to Paris because he had parents, and he went to study medicine in Paris. And he had a high school diploma, and he went to the army. And that marriage was wonderful for me. We are still close friends, but the marriage didn't last. He wanted to go back to Israel. I wanted to finish studying at the Sorbonne psychology. We are still visiting
That's
each other.
lovely. And is
He
that
comes
what you
here
did?
And I visit him.
You stayed in Paris?
I stayed in Paris until 1956, from 51 to 56.
And you studied?
I ran a kindergarten because I didn't have parents to send me money. The others who were with me had parents who sent money on the black market because it wasn't permitted to have money out of Israel. And I didn't have anybody. I was a director of a kindergarten of people who came from DP camps, from displaced persons camps, many from kind of concentration camps, on their way to Israel. So I worked and I went to the Sorbonne.
Did you have any desire to ever return to Israel?
Oh yes, for many years I came here to visit an uncle to check if he's as short as me. But I told everybody I'm going back to Israel. I have no regrets. I go to Israel, as I told you, every single year. I do documentaries in Israel because I don't just like to sit at the seashore. And maybe I'll give you some of these documentaries
Lovely.
for Shalom TV. And so for many years, like typical Israelis, I said, I'll stay here for a while. Then I got married. That was my real marriage, almost 40 years.
And when was
With
that?
Fred Westheimer. I met him skiing. We went on a T-bar. I was on a T-bar with a tall friend of mine from Holland, very uncomfortable. When the T-bar was on my behind, it was on his ankle. When it was on his behind, it was on my neck. Somebody introduced me to Fred Westheimer. I said, I go up the mountain with that short one. He wore a ski jacket from World War II. And was an engineer, German Jewish, from Karlsruhe. He was fortunate, his parents, he was also an only child, but his parents went from Karlsruhe to Portugal and stayed there for the whole year, for the whole war. 40 years they stayed there. So I knew that going up the mountain, I knew I would marry him.
Really? Is it true?
He didn't know it so fast. But I knew.
And you had how many children?
I have 2 children. One was from a previous marriage, in between number 1 and number 3.
Yes.
He adopted my daughter.
And you and Fred had one child.
And then we had 1 child.
That's lovely.
And I have 4 grandchildren. Don't forget to tell them that.
4 grandchildren. For both children?
Yeah, each one has a son and a daughter.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. And at what point does this kindergarten teacher transform herself into a sex educator?
Mm-hmm. So when I came to this country, I wanted to study. In France, I had studied psychology. Here, I got a scholarship from the new school. I got a master's in sociology. I had to fill up a few courses to fill up my BA. And now there is a Ruth Westheimer fellowship at the new school. There is one at Teachers College, Columbia University, because they lent me money to go for my doctorate. And so I did not know I would work. I thought I'll work in public health. I did a few years public health at Columbia University. And then the money ran out on a project. And I got an offer to do research for Planned Parenthood. And I took it. I needed a job. And I didn't know that I would use that data for my doctoral dissertation. And I didn't know that I would do a radio and a television program.
Okay. When you were living in Palestine, as it became the state of Israel, and you come there as an orphan of the Holocaust, was your sense that the Arab population around you was friendly, or did you have nothing to do with them? In what extent did your group have any contact with Arabs?
None whatsoever, because the kibbutz's philosophy was to never use any workers, not Arabs and not Israelis now, or not any group, except the work had to be done by the kibbutz themselves.
I understand.
It's a very different story right now. Difficult for some people to even realize that. I had no contact with anybody who was Arab, because the kibbutz was isolated. Next to us was Nahalal, where Moshe Dayan came from, but there were no Arab workers then. It is difficult to explain today to people, because right now it's a very different world.
And when you look at the enormous desire for there to be a way to share the land, that was not something that was in your mind when you were first there in Israel.
Definitely not.
As you look at it now, do you say to yourself, in terms of your own profession, yes, it should be possible for Arab and Jew to share the land that was once Palestine? Or do you say to yourself, it's a tragic situation, and that you have two peoples with such a different worldview, it's not likely to ever happen?
I'm an optimist. I believe it will happen, but I don't know when. And it has to happen, because in my way of thinking, there have to be ways of getting people out of refugee camps and of getting people to live together in peace, period. Somebody like me who talks so much about sex has to stay away from politics. I talk about family life, I can talk about education, and I can talk about the dream that everybody ought to have, that there has to be peace in that country.
Okay. And a different question. I want to tell you what your grandmother said to you all the time. Be good and trust in God. You were brought up as an Orthodox Jewish girl in a very Orthodox setting. You go to Israel, you become for a while a secular Israeli Jew.
No question. I haven't been in a synagogue in Israel in those 6 years.
Okay. Do you blame God at all for the Holocaust?
I still believe, and despite the fact of what the horror that have happened, I still do believe in that things will turn out better, period.
This is wonderful that you sat with me. And I'm going to say again, you know, you make an extraordinary contribution in your unique way. And if in some way you have been driven to defy Hitler's attempt to destroy you and your family and your people, you have done it in a way that inspires us all.
Thank you very much. Toda rabah. Thank you.
And that was my conversation with Dr. Ruth Westheimer. She needs no other introduction or comment except there is no one like her. And I hope you've enjoyed hearing her story as much as I have. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. And if you would like to be in touch with Dr. Ruth yourself, email me and I will forward your emails on to her. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, through life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM. To GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.